In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the basic steps of preparing a song to be mixed. And for the video, we're going to use the tracks that were provided from Ferguson The Wind. So the first thing I'm going to do is import the tracks. And just a sideline here, make sure that you actually, once you unzip the folder for the tracks provided to you, that you move this folder out of the zip folder. Otherwise, you'll have problems importing them. So I'm going to go ahead and import all the tracks. You'll want to make sure that you import them right to the very edge of the song file so that it will line up to your grid for time and meter. You'll also notice that I've already set the tempo of the file to the tempo that was provided in the notes file within the folder that the song tracks came in. The tracks are only to be used for educational purposes, so we'll only use them during our class. Okay, so as we look through and get a little bit more familiar with the song, of course we see all the tracks, and we can see a full drum kit as well as a tambourine, of course bass, and then we see a number of guitar tracks, acoustic and electric, and then we see a number also of vocal tracks. So first I'm going to start categorizing, and of course your DAW will work differently than what I'm using here in Producer. But I'm going to categorize each one of these groups. I'm going to, let's first begin by putting in a vocal folder. And so I'm going to grab all of the vocal tracks and move them into that folder. In Pro Tools, you might do this by groupings, and whatever DAW you're using will have a way of categorizing as well. I'm also going to stick in a drum or percussion folder. And we will grab all of those. I'm going to go ahead and take the tambourine with these. Those are drums. And the third main group, of course, would be guitars. So let's create a folder for guitars. And I'm going to leave the bass out of that folder. We'll move these all into our guitars. And then you'll come up with your own workflow. I conceptualize the song at this point. I kind of listen through and decide what will be the focal part of the song. And with this song, I think it's safe to say that vocals will probably be our focal point. And then I would probably move guitars up under vocals. And then, of course, drums. And because the bass is tightly linked usually to what's going on the drums, I would have it next and then leaving the Rhodes last. And once they're in categories, I would color code them so that at a glance I can see what's going on. So I'm just going to go down. Background vocals I would leave separately of lead vocals, so I can see all the tracks that are background vocals. And of course, any of this as you work through the mix could be changed, but my processing or the way I treat acoustic guitar, for example, could be different than how I eventually will treat the electric guitars. So I may color code them something differently from the electric guitar. And as you work through the mix, you'll modify these things. But setting it up before you begin mixing can save you a lot of time. Same thing with drums. I would just work through those, or I color code them according to what's going to happen with those. So at a glance, when I come in the file, I can see, well, there's my acoustic guitars. As you get more experience with mixing, you'll probably even come up with your own color system. So you will know just by glancing a file what's going on. Okay, from here, and of course your textbook's going to go into a little bit more depth than I will for this video. But I'm going to go ahead and, based on my categories, I'm going to insert some buses. So I'll create drums, guitars, which I might even eventually end up with 2 categories in guitars. I might do an acoustic bus that then goes into the guitars, acoustic, electric, and then goes into guitars. I'll show you that with vocals. So for example, I will create a bus called vocals, and I'm also going to create a background vocal track. And that way I can put different processing, compression, effects, everything that may apply to those background vocals separately. And then I'm going to bus, instead of going right to the master, I'm then going to take those to the vocal bus. So as I work through the mix, I can raise and lower my background vocals overall. And then the vocal bus that they are now going to will control both the lead vocal and the background vocals, so I can raise those up and down in the mix. And they can be automated separately, and of course we'll work through all of those kinds of things. So once I break out the different categories and bus them separately, then I would set up some just initial effects buses. Most likely you're going to have some kind of a short reverb, and you can label them however you best will recognize them. If you want to use a more narrow strip, you can abbreviate that. So for example, you might go for long reverb, you can abbreviate however you'd like. The more track count you have, then it can be convenient sometimes to narrow the tracks. Probably go ahead and put in a delay. So abbreviating that, maybe just DLY. And then whatever it is, preliminary effects. You can always add these buses later as you work through the tracks. And then let's see, I would go ahead and put in some markers. So as you listen through, you'll have song sections. For example, you might go introduction, do the different song sections, verse 1, chorus, and continue to work through the song labeling with markers, so you can skip around to these different pieces. You can also, if there are things you need to fix that you observe, you can just go ahead and stick a marker in as a reminder that you need to get to something in that location. And so I think with that, we are set up to go ahead and dig into the mix.